Sometimes we just need to put a dartboard on the wall and throw it, and
there you go.
Good as anything, right?
Yeah, that might be the solution.
Well, good morning, everyone. This is Stacy McFarland. I just want to welcome all of our attendees that are starting to drop onto the Zoom. Please take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat. Where are you logging in from? Are you currently a Tiffany Circle member? If so, how long have you been a member? And are you here to learn about the Tiffany Circle, a service to a service to the Armed Forces mission, or both? So please feel free to chime in the chat box. We're glad to have all of you attendants today. Also, Kendra, just a note of point, as you move your mouse, for some reason, it puts a gray box over the slides on the screen. So if you can keep your mouse, I think, off to the side. I don't know why it's tracking your mouse that way. Once again, for the new participants joining us, welcome. We are glad to have you with us on this snowy, icy day, depending on where you are in the parts of the country. And please take a moment and let us know where you're located, where you're joining us from. And if you're a current Tiffany Circle member, we will start this promptly at 12. We are trying to wrap it up in 30 minutes. We have a lot to cover in those 30 minutes. So thank you for joining us. And as a reminder, as you're replying to us and letting us know where you're from, there's a drop down in the two. It says all panelists or panelists and attendees. Make sure you put panelists and attendees so that everybody can see where you're joining us. Hi, Katie. I hope you fared the ice storms yesterday, last night, this morning well. Hi, Lisa. Thank you for joining us from Winchester. We dodged the bullet on this one, I know, in the greater Shenandoah Valley, but I think we're all in for it on Thursday with a foot of snow forecasted. For our Ohio participants, I know it's nothing like you all get out there, so. All right, well, I have 12 o'clock on my watch, and if all the panelists are ready, we'll just dive right in. All right, so welcome everyone. Thank you for attending the First American Red Cross Tiffany Circle Women on a Mission Speaker Series. It's a collaboration between the Central and Southern Ohio and Central Appalachia regions. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. This Zoom session is in webinar format. This means that your video is disabled and your mic is muted. Feel free to sit back and enjoy your lunch. Nobody on this webinar can hear or see you. That means if you do have questions, please put them in the chat box. We have a tight schedule today and we'll do our best to respond. If we are unable, we will follow up after the meeting. Lastly, this presentation is being recorded. A link to the recording will be sent to all attendees along with other resources mentioned on today's webinar. Now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Cindy Persley, Tiffany Circle Chair for the Central Appalachia region. Cindy?
Hi, Stacy, and thank you for everyone for being here for our first Women on a Mission speaker series, and we look forward to this being a long series that we can all enjoy. A special welcome to our current Tiffany Circle members. Wanted to talk with you just a little bit about the Tiffany Circle, just so that you know, and you've got a slide up there with the beautiful Tiffany window from the headquarters in Washington, D.C. Tiffany Circle is a community of women leaders who advance the Red Cross mission through focused investments of time, talent, and treasure. A little bit of history about this. More than 130 years ago, you all know that Clara Barton established the Red Cross by engaging talented, committed, and compassionate women who were dedicated to saving lives. The Tiffany Circle was established in 2006 to continue her legacy and unite and engage a group of generous and highly involved women to ensure that the Red Cross has the ability to help prevent, prepare for, and respond to life's emergencies. The Tiffany Circle takes its name from the window that you see in the slide. That beautiful historic stained glass window is in the Board of Governors Hall at the national headquarters of the Red Cross in Washington, D.C. These windows were commissioned from the Lewis Comfort Tiffany Studios, and they cost $10,000 in 2017. You're starting to see some commonalities here, right? The windows were jointly purchased by the Women's Relief Corps of the North and the United Daughters of the Confederacy of the South as an act of reconciliation and hope. So Tiffany Circle members from across the country each donate $10,000 or more annually to support the American Red Cross. And I can't think of a better time to honor Clara Barton and to be represented by the Tiffany windows than now, a time when our country is in need of some reconciliation and hope. I am so pleased that at our first speaker series, we have 3 presenters today to highlight service to the armed forces. And I'm going to give you an introduction to each of them, and then I'm going to turn it over to Angelique to start our program. Angelique Carlson is a United States Army veteran who began her career with Red Cross as an AmeriCorps volunteer to give back to her community after receiving her bachelor's degree in education from Butler University. She is an Indianapolis native who has traveled the globe with her husband, a United States Marine Corps and Army veteran. Angelique returned to the American Red Cross after receiving a master's degree in social work from the University of Louisville. Angelique is excited to bring her experiences from working and volunteering in nonprofits around the globe to serve service members, veterans, and their families in the Ohio region as Regional Program Manager for Service to the Armed Forces and International Services. We also are privileged to have with us today Leslie Caliva. Leslie began her 51-year volunteer career with the American Red Cross in Darmstadt, Germany. Over the course of her time with the organization, she has served in numerous leadership roles at military installations and in the national sector, as well as at the local and regional level. Throughout her career, she has worked in a large variety of roles within the Red Cross and is currently the vice chair of the Greater Shenandoah Valley. Her many hats also include community volunteer leader for the Winchester Northern Valley area. And finally, we are privileged to have with us today Major General Deborah Ashenhurst. Major General Deborah Ashenhurst, U.S. Army retired, was appointed Director of the Ohio Department of Veterans Services on January 14, 2019. She retired from the U.S. Army and the National Guard in October of 2015 after more than 37 years of service. In that time, she served at all levels of command. In 2011, she was appointed by Ohio Governor John Kasich to the cabinet-level position of Adjutant General of the state of Ohio, commanding the 17,000 service members of the Ohio National Guard, the Ohio Naval Militia, and the Ohio Military Reserve. She served as Adjutant General until January of 2015. Her career culminated by serving as a special assistant to the Vice Chief, National Guard Bureau in Washington, D.C. General Ashenhurst resides with her husband, Colonel Jim Ashenhurst, U.S. Army retired, in Hilliard, Ohio. We thank you for your service. It is now my pleasure to welcome Angelique Carlson to begin the presentations.
Hi, everybody. It took me a minute. I needed to make sure that I was off mute. When you do 3 or 4 Zooms a day, you'd be surprised how many times you forget. I hate to give you my rousing monologue and then it's all for naught. So for more than 140 years, the American Red Cross has provided comfort and support to members of the United States military. American Red Cross volunteers in our region have continued to provide thousands of hours of service, inventing new ways to reach our military families and our communities. Volunteers have supported service members and their families through virtual workshops, and also supported veterans and service members through their medical care, which has made a positive impact on patient satisfaction and health outcomes. Volunteers have also continued to serve as a friendly face and a comforting voice during times of crisis. Red Cross caseworkers deliver emergency communications to service members and their families 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And this has been especially important during COVID-19. Many of our veterans have also been very isolated due to COVID, and isolation often increases the risk of many health conditions to include heart disease, depression, anxiety, and stroke. For the past month, Red Cross volunteers have been serving as community connectors, calling our local veterans and providing opportunities for socialization, as well as assistance with finding critical resources like rental assistance or help with utilities. During our veterans outreach calls, our volunteers spoke with a veteran who lost her VA contracted position in October and was having difficulty finding work and paying her bills due to COVID-19. Our volunteers were able to connect her with a service to armed forces caseworker who made referrals for assistance that helped her keep her water and her electric on, while also making sure that her children had access to virtual learning. Our volunteers have shared with us many stories of hope and community connections during the outreach calls. In fact, we've connected with more than 1,300 veterans and their families in just 3 short weeks. To further combat isolation, the American Red Cross has provided tablets to homebound and hospitalized veterans. The tablets allow veterans to connect to family members that they might not otherwise see, or also to telehealth appointments. And one veteran shared that before she received her tablets, she hadn't seen her granddaughter since March of last year, and that because of the tablet, they can talk together every week. And one of the quotes that they shared to me was that she felt like she had a new lease on life. Programs like these support the health and well-being of men and women who've made sacrifices in support of America. Service to armed forces provides one place for military members, veterans, and their families to turn to in assistance whenever they're in need. And I feel like that this continuum of care really sets Red Cross apart from other services. Now I'd like to turn the discussion over to Leslie Caliva. Thanks, Leslie.
Kendra, can you help Leslie out?
Are we good?
Now we are. Thank you.
Okay, for some reason, when you put that screen up, I lose my ability to to unmute myself. So thank you. Sorry about that. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for this opportunity to just share a little bit about volunteering and the Red Cross as I know it. This is where my story began 51 years ago, was with services to the armed forces. So it really holds a big part of my heart and continues to hold a lot of my time and efforts with the American Red Cross. When putting this together, it came naturally, one, because I'm a bit of a Red Cross historian, that when we talk about volunteering and the American Red Cross, and particularly services to the armed forces, we go back to our founder, Henri Dunant, who indeed himself voluntarily threw himself into the efforts following the Battle of Solferino in 1859. And from his experience, he proposed an international treaty that would protect those removed from the fight. And he also proposed that we form a corps of volunteers that would provide those mitigating services. His vision then, just 5 short years later, led to the founding of the Geneva Conventions, the treaty, and the international movement of the Red Cross, the voluntary service. If slide, please. And of course, our founder, Clara Barton. As Cindy was saying earlier, likewise, our founder, Clara Barton, lent herself to the area of the wounded during the American Civil War and communications and tracing efforts of the missing following that conflict. And from the founding of the Red Cross in 1881, Barton and her volunteers led the Red Cross in numerous natural disasters and conflicts, such as in the War of in the Spanish-American War, sorry. Later, the American Red Cross efforts to the military, though, were cemented with our Congressional Charter of 1905, which called for the American Red Cross to be the agency that was responsible for emergency communications between our military and their families. Slide, please. Early in the 20th century, under the leadership of Mabel Boardman, who many people don't know a lot about, she focused very specifically on volunteer recruitment and organizational structure. The Red Cross began building an intricate and strong network of chapters to provide services throughout the United States. And as the United States entered World War I and President Wilson called to the Red Cross to lead war efforts, Red Cross activities literally exploded into action, and those 104 chapters grew into 3,864 chapters that were providing all of the services. Additionally, we added a war commission to actually monitor and help with the war efforts, as they were so extensive. At that time, 8 million volunteers were harnessed to support the military and the families in those war efforts. 8 million. 1 in every 3 American claimed participation and support to the American Red Cross during World War I. We had production corps, knitting and rolling. We had home service corps focusing on communications, financial and social aid, transportation corps, and canteen corps serving the community and troops on the move. From the beginnings at Walter Reed, the hospital and recreation corps supported the sick and wounded and quickly expanded the services throughout military and civilian hospitals. A lot of us remember those as the Gray Ladies. All of these and other service corps became an integral part of the Red Cross service throughout World War II, the Korean conflict, and Vietnam. And while our field staff and our recreation workers, our critical clubmobile and donut dollies, supported our troops directly, at home support services continue to be heavily relied on the dedication of volunteers. And our slide, please. It's not just history. While corps transformed to service areas, and those service areas have morphed into today's records, volunteers continue to play a clear and vital role in disaster, blood, training, international, and of course the services to the armed forces. And let's bring up our last slide, please. And today, the American Red Cross, while we aren't 8 million, we are 300,000 registered volunteers strong. We comprise 93% of the workforce of the American Red Cross. And let me add that many of those volunteers are veterans and active duty military, serving because they believe in this organization. Last year, services to the armed forces alone, just services to the armed forces, produced 698,000 service hours, and that's just service to the armed forces. And I was astounded to learn that translate into about $18 million of talent donated in 1 year. That's a lot. That makes a significant difference. The impact truly is stunning. And Angelique, you really brought home some of the very critical areas and how those services are making an impact on our community. Let me add to that almost 97,000 emergency messages were processed and cases developed and managed just in the last year, that over 260,000 briefings. We don't often realize just how important it is for us to let people know, to let our military as they enter service and their families understand that getting to know us before they need us is really important. That MEPS and deployment briefings emphasize how the Red Cross can serve them in times of crisis. We are so proud of our coping and deployment and other resiliency training workshops that support not only the military and their families, but veterans and their caregivers. We support numerous, and those that can see the slides, you will see community services and events that we work with the Guards and Reserves. Serving in veteran facilities across the nation, military hospitals and clinics around the world. That hasn't changed in over many, many years, and particularly since I joined the American Red Cross. Serving, collecting over, and here's something that is just hard to almost get your head around, collecting over 700,000 comfort items, from everything from face masks that have been sewn to greeting cards for our veterans hospitals, but an essential personal items for distribution to the troops and veterans. And that's just the small things. Angelique hit on a couple of others, but it truly does mean that we are assuring as a team, along with our incredible paid staff that support the volunteer efforts, that we're there 24/7. And I might mention that while COVID's impacted the way we serve, it certainly has not impacted our service at all. We are together creating and thinking up creative ways that we can continue to support our communities, our troops, and our veterans, because we live by our mantra, mission first, people always. And I thank you for inviting me to share just a few of my thoughts today about our volunteer service. And it really is an amazing service. It is something that I have done for 51 years, and I do it with pride. And I proudly serve beside, for those of you who can see this, a number of wonderful, incredible volunteers. And it has been my pleasure. Thank you again. And now it really is my distinct pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker. And we are thankful and welcome for her remarks today, United States Army Major General Retired Debbie Ashenhurst. General.
Thank you all so much. Leslie, I'm looking, if you served for 51 years, you must have started as a small child, you must have started that service. I'll leave it at that.
You're very kind.
But thanks for this opportunity to put on lipstick. You think about how we've been working from home and we haven't had to get dressed up or present ourselves well at all. So this was a great opportunity, and I'm very grateful to be here today. I was trying to think about what to say. I had talked with Patty about talking a little bit about the challenges of growing up as a woman in the military and all those years and all that. But I started trying to figure out how to relate that to the incredible work that you all do. I was thinking that back in the 70s, when I enlisted in the military, when I was 10, how things were so different back then, truly. I mean, yeah, women were joining the military, but you felt like the men, the real soldiers, were tolerating you. They were trying to amuse you, humor you, but it took a long time before we really became members of the organization, before they accepted us as peers and equals, if we ever got to that point. It was a lot different. And I started thinking about many of you, and since we don't see the audience, I don't know the ages of all of you, but I think that in my lifetime and so many others, we think about how women were viewed. In my world, mom was the stay-at-home mother. She'd occasionally get an odd job to raise a little money at Christmas time or when it was time to buy school supplies, that time when it always needed a little extra money. And back then we didn't think of a stay-at-home mom as a job. I mean, it was like, that was just your role, put supper on the table, take care of the men, all that sort of thing. So, that's how we came out of things. And I started looking at the Tiffany Circle and I think, how about philanthropy? I mean, the Tiffany Circle started in 2006? Now we all know that women have made a difference throughout history and throughout this time, but I'm guessing that back in those days and until recent history that we all understand, it was given under the man's name. Even if it was the woman's idea and even if the woman was contributing, we just weren't out on our own. So it's so exciting for me to see this Tiffany Circle and hear about it, and that the difference that you all make with your philanthropy and the work that you do, it's really important. Since most of my service was during the Cold War, my overseas trips were temporary South America, Central America, and some of those things. And it was mostly with the Guard. And so I know that you're talking about the work you do with the Guard and the Reserve right now. And what you don't always think about is that when someone who's on active duty has an issue, has a problem, they've got a military installation that wraps around them, takes care of them, jumps in to help, and all that. Our reserve members, they're just out in the communities. They don't have all those wraparound services that come from being stationed on an active duty installation. But you know who's there for them? The Red Cross and folks like that. I mean, think of how many times you see on the news that a family's house burned down and you look and what's the first piece that the Red Cross is already on the scene. My office lights go off and I don't, sorry. And it's the Red Cross that's there all the time. And I don't think everyone really realizes that when it comes to the reserve components, when we have as a leader, when we see a service member that has a need and we don't have an active duty installation to call on all those forces, we reach out to service organizations like the Red Cross, because you always come through, you understand the need, and you take care of our service members. Jerry, I think of all the different times that I've worked with the Red Cross, and as a reservist, you get to do the fun things. That fun is a terrible word, but you get to do things in support of your fellow citizens. So the hurricanes, the tornadoes, when things get devastated and they send in the Guard, they send in the reserve to help. You're always working with those partnership organizations, and you're always looking for the Red Cross because you know what services they bring. Now, you all know that you're the voice for emergency notifications as well. And I've had that experience as well. And when I think now back to how much I take it for granted. So my oldest nephew was going off to war. We knew that grandma wasn't going to make it till he got back a year later. But all we had to do is reach out to the Red Cross and say, what do we do? What do we do when grandma passes and we need to get that notification through? And man, you all had the skids greased. And when it happened, we had already determined the grandson wasn't coming home, but that he needed to be notified. But you all made it so easy. And I think as a military leader, with all the other stuff we have to deal with on a daily basis, it's nice to know there's an organization that already will take care of it. All you have to do is let them know what you need, and they jump in there and save the day in so many ways. I have a number of friends who volunteer for the Red Cross, and normally when you think of volunteer service, you think of somebody who goes, puts a couple hours a week in somewhere and all that. Now, I would tell you, I've got one friend, I'm like, that's a full-time job, but it's in volunteer status. So I came with such a great appreciation for what your volunteers do, as well as the rest of you. So really all I want to do is say thank you. Thank you for what each of you contributes to the great effort referred to as the Red Cross. And may no one ever forget that it may be this great organization, but it's really a bunch of individuals making a difference on a daily basis for so many. Thank you. I think now I turn it back to Angelique. Yes.
You do. I just got the message to unmute myself. Thank you, Major General Debbie. I mean, I know the best thing about her is when we met, the whole time I'm like, Major General, Major. She's like, please, Debbie's fine. Please just call me Debbie, because I'm a woman and we're just here trying to help people. And it really meant a lot to hear that from someone who heads the state of Ohio's veteran services. It really feels like you care about veterans. That's important. I'll try not to get weepy, but it was very stirring. And we all do so much that I'm proud of us, veterans, volunteers, all of these people coming together to make things just a little more comfortable, to bring a little joy. It's pretty amazing that we all do this together. But without further ado, I'd like to talk to you about the Mission Project. So when I think about the American Red Cross, I think about how many times that the Red Cross has provided comfort to me and my neighbors, whether it was by providing coffee at our local VA hospital, building morale during deployments, or making a safe space for us to share our thoughts during a resiliency workshop. I feel better knowing that the Red Cross is there for me as a service member, a family member, and as a veteran. Camp Lemonnier, Djibouti is the only forward operating base on the African continent. The base is home to all branches of the US military and has one full-time Red Cross staff member that meets the needs of the more than 5,300 service members on the base. Due to COVID-19, our soldiers and sailors stationed aboard ships in Djibouti are unable to leave the ship to shop for essentials. This has been especially difficult for female service members who have no access to personal care and hygiene needs. We are asking our members, family, and friends to share comfort with our female service members by purchasing a set of essential items through the Amazon link in the chat. And the products will be directly shipped to the Red Cross to distribute to our female service members. Thank you.
Okay, Cindy, do you have some final comments for us? Kendra, can you help her get off mute from the admin side? Cindy, if you're okay, in the interest of time, I'm just going to jump in. Okay. So thank you everyone for joining us today. If you provided your email address when you signed in, you'll be receiving a follow-up email with a link to today's recorded presentation and a link to the Amazon gift list. Please save the date for our second speaker series, which will be on April 21st with Dr. Kathy Sullivan. Yeah. She's the first NASA woman to walk in space and the first woman to travel to the depths of the ocean. That should be a wonderful event. And when the link to this program is available, we'll again email all the attendees. If you did not provide your email address today but are interested in attending, please send an email to Patty Hyatt. We'll put her email address in the chat, and feel free to join us. Before you log off, please take a moment to respond to our quick feedback survey. It'll pop up on your screens in just a moment. Again, thank you to all of our attendees. Thank you to our presenters, and we'll see you all again on April the 21st.
And thank you, Stacy. This is Cynthia. My cursor finally came back to my second screen. I apologize. Thank you for stepping in there, and thank you for all of you for participating. And we look forward to seeing you in April.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I see all those responses popping up. Thank you to everybody. It looks like we definitely will be having another one. And thank you for your feedback on topics that are of interest to you.
Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you to our presenters. Thank you, Leslie.